Welcome back to another episode of the Mechanics of Anesthesia podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that doesn't get enough attention in the medical profession, especially in the anesthesia community, and that is personal finance and overall financial literacy. As CRNAs, we're trained to manage complex physiology, but very few of us graduate knowing how to manage a six-figure income, navigate taxes, or build long-term wealth. Today's guest is Brett Fellows. Brett works with CRNAs and nurse practitioners, helping them to pay less in taxes, invest smarter, and ultimately make work optional. We're excited to have him on today because he has some perspectives that challenge a lot of the traditional finance advice people hear. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Brett, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about your background, how you got into financial planning, and then also how you started working with CRNAs.
Okay, cool. Well, that's a good question. Interesting question. It's been a bit of a circuitous route. I graduated college in 95 and from Boston, Massachusetts, and didn't know what we wanted to do. I was with two cousins. They were cousins. I was a step cousin, and they had a inn on a family-owned golf course, daily fee golf course, just outside Boston, Massachusetts. That was in its second generation, and it was faltering because it was so fractured. And so the three of us said, well, why don't we go in there and form an operating company and kind of take it over? And again, we were 20 or so, didn't know anything about anything. But it was important because, and we did it. We formed the operating company. We got the lease and all that because of them. Had nothing to do with me. But what was really interesting was in 1996, a guy by the name of Tiger Woods turned professional. So you may have heard of him. And we were 20 minutes outside Boston proper. So location, location, location. And the golf business just absolutely boomed. We were open from 5 a.m. till 11 p.m., May through October, a very seasonal, all cash. Our blue collar, our clients were coming in with cutoff jeans and a Nomar Garcia Parra Red Sox shirt, and that was our clientele. But it was crazy, and we grew it, and then we got from one facility to two facilities to three facilities. So fast forward to 2003, now all of a sudden baby boomers are retiring. That's important because they're the ones who fill the cheat sheets Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when nobody else can. But the stock market crashed, so the retirees kind of came back, and all of a sudden, so the golf business went into a big dip. And our issue for us was we were only an operating company. We never owned any of the land. And so the trust, the original trust that owned the land, this real estate now was booming. So they were getting offers from these huge builders to develop the land as opposed to our little piddly check that we were paying them to run the golf course. So I ran the Boston location eventually, and we were going to lose it. So I was like, all right, well, I'm not moving further north. I just had kids like Ben, and I was changing diapers, and I was like, I'm not moving further north. So unfortunately, I was able to sell. I was like, all right, well, now what am I going to do? And so I knew I wanted to get out of New England. We moved to Charleston, South Carolina, just for weather and pace of life. And I had money and time from the business. I was like, well, I'm going to get into finances because I have financial background from the golf side. I have decent people skills from the golf side. Everybody's going to retire to the Southeast. I'm going to do financial planning. So that was 2005. And then, as I was just saying to you guys, it grew over the next 20 years as very sustainable practice. But what I found was, over time, behind the scenes, we were having to deal with a lot of different financial planning issues that were all different. Everybody had different types of things. We had retirees, we had pre-retirees, we had business owners. And it just got to this point where in 2023, I was just like, we don't need new business. If we do get new business, I just want one client that has one problem, that has one solution. So therefore, we can just act from a checklist, you name it. Everything is very systematized. But I didn't know what that client and what that problem and what that thing that we could do for them was. I had an idea, so I took every possible test, and I took personality tests and professional tests, and it came back that you should be a CRNA. And as I told you guys, I didn't even know what that was. So I had to look it up. I spent 6 months kind of studying it, but oddly enough, on a parallel track, my two girls were at Clemson University, both in the nursing program. And the oldest, proud to say now, has been in the ER for about 3 years, and she's going on to the CRNA track. And next, and then the youngest is a pediatric nurse in Richmond. So I thought it was like, oh, that's really interesting. These tests, I have a servant mindset, definitely, but these tests are telling me I should work with CRNAs or I should be a CRNA because demographically, psychographically, I relate to them. And at the same time, my daughters are in that field, and I'm obviously learning about what's going on. So I thought, really, there's not a lot of people talking about money and finance to you guys. I thought that'd be a really neat place to be. And I was like, I'm just going to give it 3 years. I'm going to give it my all, and we'll just see how it goes. And here we are in 2026.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So we are and if you see my website or anything like that, the only new clients we take on are CRNAs or nurse practitioners.
We appreciate what you do for our profession as well.
Definitely. It's definitely a niche little market too. So we definitely need more of you. So thank you.
Yeah. 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 100%. Well, there's 55,000 of you. So definitely.
So I guess to kind of kick it off, you answered one of the questions we were going to ask. Why did you decide to specialize with CRNAs and healthcare providers? But I guess continuing on, what are some of the biggest financial mistakes that you see CRNAs make? Is it usually like lifestyle creep or lack of budgeting?
Well, I guess if I can, related to like who we work best with and who we are very targeted, we are very our ideal client profile. And most of the clients we worked, they're generally around age 50 to or so. They have about $750,000 or more saved. And I guess to answer your question, Dylan, it's very common. So think about it. You get thrown in your first job, you get a 403B, you put monies in, you set it up maybe once or twice. Um, Predominantly in the healthcare field, it's all pre-tax. And the second thing is with CRNAs, we can make a lot of money. So for us to be able to maximize or put away as much as the IRS allows us, that's very common because of your income. So here's the problem I see. If you fast forward to your age 55 or 60, for you to have over $1 million is very common. It's not that hard to do. Most of our clients have maybe between 2 and 4 million. But at issue is now you're starting to get a little bit burnt out. And I think, Eric, you mentioned it, kind of make work optional. And so you're thinking, all right, when can I stop this? I kind of have an idea. I read or I pay attention. I think I can. I don't really know how much is enough. What is my number? But more importantly, kind of the invest smarter and pay less in taxes is the way that the IRS sets us up is that eventually all of this pre-tax money you are going to have to flush out, which known as required minimum distributions. So in theory, and I'll just generalize and get right to the point, it's very common for somebody who's age 62 now with $2 million to pay more in taxes in retirement than they did while they were a CRNA making 300 grand a year in income. And nobody knows that. And the other interesting thing is we are in the lowest tax brackets since 1980. And the government, we have this debt that's rising. And there's not a lot of revenue sources for the government to tax, but we have $37 trillion. So maybe our parents, our grandparents all have all of this pre-tax money from 401ks that was sitting there. That's where the bulk of personal net worth is sitting. That's going to transition in the next 15 to 25 years. What do you think is going to happen to tax brackets when the IRS sees that happening? The brackets are going to go up. So because it's low hanging fruit for them to make more money. So back to your question, I think the biggest thing I see is we don't pay enough attention to how much money goes in pre-tax versus after tax and or Roth. And I get it. It makes sense today. We want to pay the least amount of tax today, but we've never looked at what does that look like to you 30 years down the road.
Yeah, and that's a very, I would say, common areas of misconception or just, I would say, lack of understanding with Even something, you hear 401k, 403b, but the differences in those contributions, whether it be Roth, traditional, after tax, all of those things, it's kind of not really discussed unless if you venture out on your own or
Yeah.
if you meet with a financial planner to discuss those things, and especially, you know, young healthcare professionals, I think that's probably one of the more important times to be investing. I would argue because you obviously have a lot of time to invest, and it's theoretically you can take a little bit higher risk.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's nobody's fault. It makes sense. And I pick on CPAs. My wife's a CPA, so I'm allowed to say this. Accountants want you to button up your tax return now and pay the least amount today. And then so they look, if you will, in the rear view mirror, and it makes sense. But nobody's looking in the front mirror, if you will. Or said another way, we don't know what taxes are going to be. Even if you're making $300,000 and you're paying 24% or 22% in tax, maybe you still, when you're like, well, I'm going to be making less in retirement than I am now. That's not necessarily true. B, wouldn't you rather pay 20% on tax on money as opposed to 35%, even if it means putting some money in Roth today?
Yeah.
But no
Yep.
CPA is going to tell you that.
Brett, we see a lot, and I've seen you talk about the psychology of money. Um, what would you describe that as? I know that's a very vague and generalistic question, but how would you describe that? And then how would you also say people can improve their knowledge about the psychology of money or improve their, intelligence regarding that?
Yeah, there's a great book. It's written, The Psychology of Money, where they put it really eloquently. I mean, if you think about it, think about your field, think about medicine and just how much medicine has grown in the last 20 or 30 years. Just how smart people are and how much improved, how much more we know about medicine today than we did, say, 30 years ago.
Hmm.
Look at finance. Think of how many smart people, think of all the Ivy League institutions and how many people went into finance and money for the last 50 years. Are we any smarter today about money than we were 50 years ago? 100% not. So it's this huge disservice. So again, it's nobody's fault, but money, to answer your question, very simply, it has less to do with what you know and more to do with how you behave. So money is, we're CRNAs or math. We got to calculate a lot of stuff. We think there's math that goes into money. It really isn't. It's more about behavior. Again, it's not to paint a broad brush, but the answers. It's very simple. We just make life complex. Don't, pay ourselves first. We're never taught that. Think of how do you learn to balance a checkbook? The money comes in, you pay your bills, and whatever's left, you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll save that. That's reverse. You should actually pay yourself first and then pay it. So again, I just feel like money overall is taught incorrectly. It's nobody's fault, but if you, like anything else, compound that over 10, 15 years worth of life, it's really hard to change. And it's hard to change smart people to change their ways when it comes to money.
Sorry, did you say the book was called The Psychology of Money?
Yes.
That's funny. I actually just picked this book up a month ago and started reading it. And I think one of the most interesting things I read from it was how it's too often that we let our emotions kind of dictate what we're gonna do with our money. And so and sometimes it's like high stress situations, you end up backing out of deals that you should have stayed in, or either like just being too afraid to actually follow through with like what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's 100% true. And think about it. I have a financial advisor. I am a financial advisor. So if you think about it, it's so emotional. Money is your personal money is so emotional. So when things go awry, whether it's the stock market or something like that, it's natural to make emotional decisions. So that's why I believe, anyways, it makes sense to have somebody you need or trust because they're not you. They're the ones that don't have the emotion tied to it. That's really important. And you mentioned, Eric, lifestyle creep and all that. Yeah, 100%. That's all true.
Yeah, and I think CRNAs definitely, I would tie that into other anesthesia providers, physician specialties, because you go so long without having really any money, and then you're in this money drought where you've budgeted, and hopefully you've lived well within your means, and then all of a sudden you've got this cash flow, and truthfully, it's very, it's a weird feeling, and it is life changing, that obviously that amount of money, but you also recognize that nothing is necessarily permanent, and it's still, you have to, as you said, behave well with your money so that 25, 30 years from now you're not struggling financially, because really there's no reason to be struggling financially. I would make the argument that that as CRNAs, as healthcare professionals making a very high quality living, there's really no reason to struggle financially.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I agree. And in fairness, there's seasons of life. You guys are young. It's going to be hard. You've got having kids. You're just starting. So you have to give yourself a sense of grace, but at the same time, again, we have to just, what you think your grandmother told you or what she would have given you advice on, that's probably the right advice.
Yeah, it's very true.
And then on the flip side of it, so I would say like, especially I've learned in CRNAs the last few years, because you make so much money and the ones who do save, my contrarian thought is we actually work too long. You can actually retire.
Yeah.
Most people could actually retire a little bit earlier than they think. So it's kind of almost the same problem, but reversed. Because then we get so far, we have money, and emotionally we're like, well, not yet. Well, another year of 500,000 in income. But think of what you're putting off.
Yeah, that's a great point. I haven't really thought of it that way, but I think we've all, between the three of us, we've probably seen anesthesia providers that you're kind of wondering, like, why the heck are they still working? And
Yeah.
not to mean any offense, but why the heck are they still working? Like, you have a finite amount of time on this planet, and there's times where you're like, I understand if you love what you do, but man, I kind of come from that mindset of, I would love to be able to retire early, but I don't want to be working until I'm 70, 80 years old. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then there's another thing, that word retire, I think is kind of a terrible word.
Mhm.
Retire sounds so finite, sounds so dead. But you could do something else, Eric. You could go teach, or you might do something else. It doesn't mean you're
Yeah,
stopping. So it doesn't have
exactly.
to be, retire doesn't need to be final. But you could graduate, if you will, to something else. And you could have more money that can get you there than you need. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, Brett, I just really quickly wanted to clarify when you say like pay yourself first, what exactly before you do like the bills and whatnot, what exactly does that kind of mean? You just mean like putting in your 401k or sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It really doesn't matter where. So yes, it could be in your 401k, it could be your savings account. Definitely there are steps you should take. If we have a lot of if we have debt that's costing us more than 8%, I think obviously we should pay that off first before we do anything else. So let's just say all of that is out of the way and I have extra cash. What do I do with it every month? My point is more kind of the math equation to it. So like I said, most of us, if you think about it, you probably get paid and you pay your bills. And then if you have money left over, that's the money that you tend to invest. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm saying it's just the opposite. So let's say you've tracked, you're aware of how much you spend. And let's say you spend $6,000 a month and you know that you make 10, so you have $4,000 a month left over. I will tell you after 25 years of this, if you just leave that $4,000 a month and just invest it maybe at the end of the month after you have paid all the other bills, guess what? That 4,000 is going to get eaten down to 2,000. So
Your
I'm just
security
saying,
blanket.
flip it. Put that 4,000 wherever you want it to go, whether it's your Roth or your brokerage account or 401k or all of the above. do that first and then just live off of the 6. You'll be much more successful long term.
That makes okay. Thank you for clarifying that. It makes a lot of sense.
And we think, again, we're set up, payroll says, you can set up your payroll to have it go to those accounts as well. And just you're only your net, too often we just use our checking account and we just because it's easier, and we then invest, let's say, after that. But if you have a brokerage account or something, you can have monies being sent to that first. So the only money that comes into your checking account is the money that you need to live. Just like you do a 401k or an HSA, you don't even notice it's gone. It just goes somewhere. But very rarely do we set it up that way. So again, it's more behavioral.
And so the pre-tax savings, Brett, I know that you explained to us that you're very much so against that. So just for the purpose of not only us but the audience as well, maybe explain the difference between the pre-tax savings versus after-tax savings,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah. No, this is a big one. I think this is huge. I love Roth just in terms of, again, back to pre-tax. So in the 80s, this is when 401ks came into play. And yes, you get to money. The traditional, they call it, is you put monies in, and whatever monies you put in, you are not paid tax on that today. And you get to grow those monies tax deferred. And then again, you pay tax on whatever it grows to later at retirement when obviously you're living off of that income. But again, that started when tax brackets were higher. So the theory made sense about being a lesser tax bracket at retirement. Well, as I mentioned, since the 80s, tax brackets have come down. And so in the 90s, Roth was introduced. Roth is an actual senator's last name. Roth is just the exact opposite. You're saying, no, I want to pay tax today. I still put the monies in the account and they will grow tax deferred, if you will. The difference is when I take the monies out, I pay no tax again. And it was kind of 50-50, just in terms of pre-tax, whether it made sense, or Roth, whether it made sense. But the big change came in with the Secure Act 2.0. And this is really what kind of threw me over the top in terms of, it used to be, if my parents had pre-tax money in a 401k and they died and I inherited it, I used to be able to spread that money out over my lifetime. So that could have been, again, pay tax on it over my lifetime. So that could be another 20, 30, 40 years. So, okay, it wasn't that big of a deal because it was called the stretch IRA. We were able to stretch it out. But with the Secure Act, what the government said was, no, if you are not a spouse and you inherit somebody's retirement account, whether Roth or pre-tax, you have to spend that monies within 10 years of date of death. So now, if I inherit my mother's pre-tax retirement account, I have to pay tax on that at least 10 years from the date she died. So that just throws me into a higher tax bracket. So it just totally changed tax planning, estate planning, all that we were doing for clients. And with Roth, even though you have to distribute it within 10 years of death, there's no tax on it, so who cares? So that all kind of just changed, especially for estate planning too, because now we've got tax brackets are lower, but they are going to come back up again. Required minimum distributions are low-hanging fruit for the government. We're making more. The market has been, for you, again, CRNA, for you to have a couple $1 million is right in their sweet spot. So you're going to pay more in tax later, and or it goes to your kids and they're going to have to pay more in tax. Just wouldn't you rather, we call it the tsunami of tax that hits us later. Wouldn't you just rather normalize that over time and whatever goes to your kids is tax free? That math can be done. I kind of went off tangent. That kind of makes sense. It's just in pre-tax and Roth.
Yeah. Yep.
I actually had a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So I guess, or even just a clarifying question for people who don't know. So when you're talking about doing the difference between traditional and Roth 401k, can you kind of like, I guess, clarify like whether you set up your 401k so it's all like that, or is this like contributions that you're making after you're contributing to like a traditional 401k, more as like a backdoor Roth?
I think I'm understanding the question. I guess how I would say it is this, and my point is not Roth isn't always the answer. It isn't always the best thing. Now, and specific to CRNAs, what I do think is, again, we fill up tax brackets. So we pay 10%, then we pay 12%, then we pay 22%. So you're not just taxed everything at 32%. We fill them up. So there is a happy medium, if you will, where some should go to pre-tax, some goes to Roth, and mathematically that makes sense. If you do start to make 400,000 or more, then I would say, you know what, Roth does not make sense. It makes more sense for us to do pre-tax now. And in that case, Dylan, to answer your question, yeah, what I might do though at the same time is what's known as a backdoor Roth, where we can't, it doesn't make sense for us tax wise for us to put Roth 401k, and we can't do a Roth IRA because we make too much money, but you can do a backdoor Roth IRA just in the spirit of time. That's an IRS way where you can put monies into a traditional IRA, automatically convert it to Roth, and you don't have to worry about any tax implication. But it's only $7,000 a year or so, 7,500, so it doesn't really move the needle that much. But I think I want to get back to the point of, yeah, if you're making 400 or more, it probably doesn't make sense to do Roth. And if that's the case, that's okay. And this is why I love CRNAs, because there is what we call your gap years. So let's say, again, you burn out, you want to retire, or maybe just come down or just do locum work in 62 or so. Well, you don't have to do Social Security till you're 67. You don't have required minimum distributions till you're 73. So if you've got this 5, 7, 10-year window where in theory your income has now come down, it's not $400,000 a year, it's maybe 200,000 or 150,000. Well, we convert your pre-tax money then. So don't ever worry that, oh, I'm not doing Roth now. It may make sense for you not to do Roth now if you're that high income, but you have an amazing opportunity to do it later. So that's pretty cool.
Brett, can you go ahead and just say that again? So the say for example, the company I work at, and for most people, I think you have that option to do traditional 401k contributions versus Roth 401k contributions. So you're saying if you make above that $400,000 mark, it's probably more beneficial to do the traditional 401k contributions.
Yeah, and yeah, like anything, there's a mix. You could say 300. I would just say if you make 250,000 or less, I would do Roth all day long. Then there might be a little marrying, and then once you get over 350, 400,000, I probably wouldn't do Roth at all.
But you can convert that to, you can convert your pre-tax contributions.
Yeah, once you
to
stop
tax-free.
working and your taxable income drops and you're in that 10% or 12% or 22% tax bracket. Because again, I can show you if you leave it in pre-tax and it's still invested, by the way. So if it's still going to, the rule of 72, if it doubles every 7 to 10 years, 30 years from now, when you're forced to take the money out, you could be at a much higher tax bracket. So we may convert from age 62 to 70, $50,000 a year. So you don't have that huge wall of tax later. We just kind of ease it out over time. So you're always paying 18%, let's say.
Gotcha. No, that's great. That's an excellent point. It's very, very insightful.
And there's another part to this that we just talk about a lot. Again, for you guys so young, it doesn't matter, but there's also what's known as Medicare. And Medicare at 65, the price on Medicare is not fixed. It depends on what your income was 2 years ago. So again, if you are 75 and you're to have all this pre-tax money, not only are you paying the IRS more, there's what's called Medicare IRMA surcharges. You could be paying $650 a month for Medicare when the average rate is 200. Because again, you just left the money alone. So doing nothing is not an option. Roth is the answer. It's just, should it be now? Should it be later? Or a combination in between? But doing nothing, you're just letting the government decide you're going to give as much money to them as
Yeah.
possible.
We don't like that. We don't
Yeah, you
want to
guys
do
are too
that.
smart. You work too hard. You make too much money. And again, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know a thing about what you guys do, and you guys don't need to know this stuff. But that's what people like us are for.
Yeah. That's great.
I'm gonna steal one of Eric's points later and kind of jump the script a little bit, but I feel like it's kind of also kind of ties into it a little bit too. But I know one thing we wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit is about like student loans because it's something that obviously many of us have coming out of school. I mean, it's hard to save and try to pay for it all up front, especially as like people are starting to get in a little bit younger. You're working for a few less years. So like with student loans being so high, in your book, I know you mentioned one of the best things you can do is just making sure you have a plan, whether it's you're going to pay it off on your own or you're going to do PSLF. And I think one thing that I've come across is like when you're doing like PSLF, would you like so like reducing your AGI is probably like the best option you have to like lower some of your payments. Would you say like doing traditional like contributions in that sense is makes more sense then?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. I think, Dylan, if you can show on your tax return that you can lower the AGI enough that it moves the needle, that's where I get cautious. I don't know if we could lower it enough to really make it worthwhile. And I think I mentioned to Ben, I know I have like a mix, and in fairness, like I said, most of our clients are 50 or 60 or so, so we're not dealing with this a lot. Um, in fairness, I have a little bit of a different take on student debt. I mean, whenever we talk about debt, debt on an asset that appreciates is good debt. So your home or a business or what I think is you guys, student debt. I think that's very good debt. That's a business, in another way. You couldn't make the money, if in theory, as a nurse, the same money as a CRNA if you didn't take that debt to get that education. And just like me starting a business, I didn't want to spend that money, but it got me to where I wanted to go. And it took me a while. You have to get capital some way.
Yep.
So we either borrow it or we make it some way, shape, or form. So not paying it back, or this goes back to Ben's comment about paying yourself first. I just think we have this, there's a huge negative connotation on student debt. And I want to put aside, is CRNA professional designation, the limits and all that stuff. I don't mean to get into all that, but it was a conscious decision we made to take on the debt, just like conscious decision I made to start a business. I had to pay it back. I didn't want to. So I just feel like it's really good debt to have. And if you pay yourself first and manage your money well enough, it can be gone before you know it.
And then just one thing, I guess, to clarify. So for like the viewers, adjusted gross, I guess, can you explain adjusted gross income? You probably have better words for it than I would.
Well, AGI is more about, you see, your gross pay, and then you have your above the line, they call it deductions. So things like to a 401k or basically in W-2 speak, it's a 401k type of thing. And again, where I caution on that is, especially for young people, we need every dollar that we can make to live. So
Yeah.
does it make sense to put money to lower my AGI, but yet I'm racking up credit card debt because I don't have enough cash flow? I don't know. And then I'm paying 25% on my credit card, whereas my student debt's a lot less interest rate. So Dylan, so AGI just lowers your taxable. It's a way to lower your taxable income. But at the end of the day, especially for W-2, there's not a lot of levers that you can pull to get your gross income to your adjusted gross income.
Gotcha.
I've seen that you mentioned, Brett, about your umbrella. I saw it in your book. And for us, I think I was actually just talking to my dad about this today because he's from the standpoint like, oh, you don't need insurance. Why would you ever need disability insurance? Why don't don't do that. And I think you speak on the importance, especially with our earning potential, that safety net. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, whether it be short-term disability, more so in that short term?
Yeah, I think again, I hate insurance. I
Yeah.
hate budgets and I hate insurance. I'm the first to admit it. But here's my 2 cents. I think life insurance, get as much term insurance as you possibly can. And ladder it, do whatever you have to do. It's very inexpensive. You can do it online now. It's short money. But again, think of yourself as a business. How much money are you going to make per year? If you make 300 grand a year for 10 years, 20 or 30 years, that's a lot of money. God forbid something happened to you that your family's not going to get. So you definitely want to have 10 or 20 times your income in term life insurance. That's great. It's inexpensive, not a big deal. The more important one is disability insurance, I would say. So again, you guys make your money, make your living off of your mind and your hands. And the probability of you dying, frankly, is not that big. The probability of one of the four of us not being able to work for 90 days or more, I think it's something like 38%. So one of us is gonna definitely not be working for 90 days or more. That's disability. And so short-term disability covers those first 90 days, if you will. Long-term disability covers after 90 days. Long-term disability, generally speaking, with employers, you guys have to pay yourself. That you might get some employer paid. It's usually not that much, or it's a base amount.
Mhm.
But again, think about how much money you make. It's probably, it could be, let's just say for math, it's 10,000 a month that you make. Well, at most, the insurance policies that you have through work will cover 60%. So let's just say down to 6,000, but you were living off of 10. Oh, and by the way, you were saving, you were investing into a 401k and all that. So all that goes away. So then there's what's called supplemental disability. So I'm only espousing what I have. So I have a work policy that might cover that first 6, and then I buy another 4,000 on my own to get me whole. God forbid something should happen to me, because again, that's a much greater probability, and it's more expensive, unfortunately. And I hope you never use it. I hate. I hope you lose it. Never use it and lose it. But that's probably the best personal insurance I have ever seen, or I would recommend. And then on the flip side, Eric, we were saying, yeah, like for property and liability, I don't know that's important so much when you're younger, but definitely as you get older and your net worth generally goes above $1 million to $1.5 million, then you really need to think about an umbrella policy. So you've got your auto policy. If I hit a doctor going to the Medical University of South Carolina and he knows, and he's making $500,000 a year, and my limit on my auto policy is only up to X, but they know that I have assets, and they're going to come out, a smart lawyer is going to come after that. The umbrella coverage covers the difference. So same thing like the disability, but it covers what your auto or your homeowners doesn't cover. So when you start to have kids and they're driving, your assets are worth a lot more, thus they're more susceptible to things like lawsuits. That's where an umbrella policy comes into play, usually 1 to 2 times your net worth, and it might cost $800 or something like that.
Yeah, and I think like for the company that I work for, that supplemental is deemed as a buy-up benefit, or it's a buy-up insurance. Just to kind of clarify for anyone listening, you might see those two terms interchangeable, but it's the same concept. Your employer, and you provide a base amount for, like you said, the 60% of income, but you can buy up that extra benefit to really get you covered in the event that you're not able to work, especially if you're a single income in your family, you're the lone provider of income in your family. I think it's even more important in that aspect.
This all goes back to behavioral. This all goes back to pay yourself first. Again, if we let all of our money just flow through our checking account, I'm probably not going to write that disability check.
Yeah.
But had I done it first, which I know is probably the better thing, I don't want to do it, but if I pay that first, it's just smarter planning overall.
Yep. Right on. Well, transitioning gears a little bit on kind of successful investing outside of our job.
Okay.
I mean, I could go for a while on this, but I do have one quick question. I guess since we kind of all have little kiddos at this point, do you think, what do you think the best strategy for like planning your future kids, grandkids, college fund is? Do you think it's 529B is sufficient, or do you have other workarounds or other ways that you can get?
Yeah. So we've dealt with this a lot, dealt with this personally. Obviously, I think education's a really neat thing. Education, very similar to medical expenses. Education's increasing at 6% a year. So, you guys are talking about student loans. Can you imagine what your poor children, what their education is going to cost? Anywhere out of state now is anywhere from 50 grand to 100 grand a year.
Yeah.
I'm reading it's going to be 300 to 400,000 by the time my daughter's 18 and she's 1 right now. So
A year. Yeah.
Yeah, they said that's how much you should have saved.
Yeah. So my point is, okay, so we'll get rid of the whole secondary education discussion. Is it worth it and all that? So I don't know that it is unless you have a very specific thing that you're studying. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens. So in that light, I definitely think 529s is the best place to start, especially if you're in your state. I don't know about Illinois, but like here in South Carolina, we have a state income tax. So any monies I put into the South Carolina 529, I got to deduct from my state income. So if I put 10 grand in, I could deduct 10 grand from my gross income down. It lowers my AGI. But I never recommend usually putting more than $100,000 into a 529. Now, the beauty of a 529 is it grows tax deferred, and whatever you use it towards schooling or private school, you don't pay any tax on any of that growth. That's fine, but that sounds sexier than it is because your kids, even as young as they are, that's not a huge window. Maybe 17 years before you need that money. So that's not a lot of time because the markets go so up and down. You don't really want to be playing. So that's more of a selling feature than an actual utilitarian feature, I think, of 529s. I like it more for the state income tax deduction. Then yes, definitely save about 100,000. But then you get into, well, what if my kid doesn't go to college? Or what if they get a scholarship? Or what if? Well, then they're too penal if you don't use that money for education. Now, yes, you can change the beneficiary if you have more than one child, etc. I still think you need to save for retirement, but what we do, college, forgive me, we save about 100,000 in a 529, and then we just save the difference in a brokerage account that is completely free for you to do or use whenever you want. And then we put those monies into the 529 for the tax purpose just whenever we need it, and we flow it through. So you still have the college savings there. I just wouldn't put it more than 100,000 into a 529 because of the what ifs. Does that make sense?
It's very tunneled to what you can use it for.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you are kind of right because like timing the market, I'll give you an example. Is my sister's 3 years older than me. She's 32. And my dad had a bunch of stocks, and basically she started college around 2011, 2012. And obviously the stock market had that great recession in 2008. So my dad had mentioned that he had lost about 65% of at that time. And it bounced back a little bit by the time I was in. But really it's hard to time it.
Yeah, I say even when kids get into, when your son is a freshman in high school, I tell clients, get that 529, that first year's money for college, put it into cash. And they're like, what? That's crazy. But I'd rather have it in a safe, interest-bearing type of thing because, again, 5 years is going to go like that, and you don't know what the markets are going to do.
Especially, I feel like the market's extremely volatile, and it probably will continue to be that way for the foreseeable future. But yeah, that's an excellent point, Ben, because it's something that you don't really think about. But as you said, Brett, I like the thinking about like if they're freshmen in high school, you kind of start to think, okay, how can I liquefy this fund so that you really just kind of take the risk out of it in a way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, just like retirement accounts, they have these default age-based funds or kind of target date funds. And I really think those things are the wrong things to be using. But yeah, but I'm happy to talk too if you want about the stock market, because I think, Eric, what you said about that is fascinating. I have an interesting take on all of that.
Please, please, go ahead. Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's now. Granted, I say it's volatile, but I also, you know, I think from a perspective of being young, that we don't really necessarily see. Like, I don't have a large 401k or a large retirement account. I'm just seeing on the day-to-day basis, which obviously it's definitely very hyper fixated when you look at it every day. You're like, because that's what the market does. But I'd love to hear your opinion on that because
Yeah, but
I respect it. So
no, it's great. I mean, I love this topic. I mean, again, and I will counter and say you already know all this. I don't care how much money you have. You are, again, back to your grandmother. You already know all this.
yep.
The simple thing is, if you've ever had done it, Google compounding penny. Would you rather have $1 million in cash today or a penny that compounds on itself for 30 days? Just Google that.
Oh, you'll have so much more, and
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you got to think about the stock market. All right, let's throw that out there. What are you really investing in? You are investing in companies that have a board of directors, and they have to adhere to their stockholders, who ultimately are you if you own that stock. So pick anything you want. You want to talk about Trump? Do you want to talk about 9/11? Do you want to talk about World War II? You want to talk about 1970s inflation? You can talk about whatever you want. Guess what has always happened since 1926 when the stock market started? Companies have always adapted and have figured out ways to make money, and they always will. Now, is there short-term volatility, and does this feel worse than it was before? 100%. But again, if you take a step back, if you look, and you guys, again, you know all this, the market will return about 10% a year if you just leave it alone.
Yep.
The problem is we never leave it alone.
We're impatient.
It's very natural. Back to it's very hard when things become emotional to not want to get out. But what do you do then? Well, then you sell low. And then you're like, holy crap, it's going really well. Let me get back in. Well, then you're buying high. Again, the whole opposite of what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
So I think that the market is an amazing place to be. If you want passive growth for most of us, that's the best. We don't want to be active managers of real estate, or some people do, or that's all great. But if you want to grow your money passively, the stock market's the best place to do it. And again, AI, the world is as crazy as the world is, and as dissected as it might be. There are still, at the end of the day, I still think that as humanity, we are always trying to make things better. And there's always new ways that that's going to happen. And you're just investing in that. You can't control it. So just focus on the things that you can control and let the other stuff go.
I would follow up with you on that, is that I think most people that have I would say a little bit of understanding of the market is, I think you've probably heard time in the market is better than timing the market. And it's very, very common saying, but I try to just, especially as we get older, and obviously we're just graduating school. So it's a little bit different, but I think, 10, 20 years from now, it's important to remind yourself that there's only been, I think, 2 or 3 years in the last 100 years where the stock market has not made a positive gain over a calendar year. And so when you think about that, no matter who the president is, no matter what's going on overseas, no matter what, you're probably a pretty safe investment to invest in the stock market.
Yeah, again, it's not to take away that this isn't scary, or we don't know what's happening, and that's fair. But it is important to know, and I do want to say, accumulating money is a lot different than distributing money. So you have to, that's again why we say invest smarter. distributing money from a portfolio, you have to be invested much different than you do for you guys, where all you need to do is grow your money. So there is that distinction. And then back, Eric, I kind of leave you with this. If you want a tip of the day, of how do you invest your money, and it's really very simple. There's 4 rules, and 3 of them are amazingly easy. The 4th one's a little more technical, but if you do these 4 things for the rest of life, 100% you will outperform all of your neighbors. So 96% of market performance has to do with how you are allocated. The other 4% has to do with what you pick and the timing of it. But as natural, most of us spend all of our energy on that 4%, whereas the other 96 is evidence-based on how we allocate. Okay, so what does that mean? Very simple. The market will always outperform cash. That's number 1. That's pretty straightforward. So most people have too much money in cash. I would argue that I can argue in a lot of cases, cash is more aggressive than being in the stock market. So market will always perform cash. That's number 1. So, and you can use these when you look at your 401k statements. Value will always outperform growth over a 10-year period. So when you look at your menu, if you see something that says large value or mid-cap value, that's what you want more than large growth or mid-cap growth. So large will outperform growth. Small will outperform large. So again, just think of smaller companies. They can grow more than a larger company can. So value will outperform growth. Small will outperform large. And the last one's a little bit more technical. High profitability companies will make more than low profitability companies. Then that has to do with PE ratios. So the lower the PE ratio, the better. But if you just do really just those first 3 things, market versus cash, value over growth, small over large, that's the best way to invest.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wish I could just imprint that into my brain every day as I look into my investment account and see just what the stock market is doing, because it is, it's short-term volatility, but it's even that uncertainty that bothers you, but you have to have that reminder that
you guys should be like this. When you see the market
right?
go down, you should be like, oh my God, I need to
It's
buy.
an opportunity. It's an
I need to
opportunity.
buy. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
You're just buying units. It's not money. You're just buying units. And the cheaper the unit, the better for you.
Better it is.
I think it was in your book. You also meant, I feel like I've seen this multiple times now, but when they talk about Warren Buffett, and it's like what Warren Buffett does well is when the market's low, he buys more.
100%.
Yep.
Best way to
100%.
make more returns.
Yep.
It's an opportunity to gain more wealth. And
again, it's just behavioral. It's
Yep.
just we make it more complex than it needs to be. And
yeah. So finishing up, Brett, we tend to give every guest that's on our podcast an opportunity to share one piece of advice with us. In your situation, it can be financial, it could be just life advice. We give you the opportunity to share one piece of advice with our listeners, with us, and we would love to hear what you have to offer.
so that's a great question. You didn't give me a heads up that this was coming. All right, so you're putting me on the spot.
Try to make it a surprise.
I would say my biggest thing that I have learned over the last probably 25 years, we all have this idea, and I'm trying to connect this with you guys at your age, the career you have, the things you're starting, the families. We all have this ideal of what we're going to become or what we should do or how much money we're going to make. And you guys are going to be on that path, and you're going to see other people with the bigger house or the other car and taking the other trips. But if you think about the ideal, it's kind of like the horizon. You can see it, but if you head towards it, that kind of adage, you're never going to get there just because it just keeps moving away. So that vision of ideal, you guys talked about lifestyle creep earlier, it's always going to be changing, which is normal. So the important part is to turn around and just look back at how far you've come. So as you maybe not for you guys just yet, but can you imagine where you are today 5 years ago? Or if you're 45, look back at how much money you were making when you were 35. You've probably 10x the amount. So too often we just focus on the gap in life of what we're missing, and we don't spend enough time appreciating the gain that we've accomplished.
Yeah, that's a very perfectly timed for me, and I think probably majority of people listening, because I'm in that situation of buying a house, getting done with school, and I think it's just easy to get so hyper focused on what's in front of you that you kind of forget all that you've done. And like you said, 5 years ago, this career, the house we moved into, all would have been things that I would have absolutely dreamed of, and
Right.
now I'm living it. So
Right.
that's an excellent, man, that hits close to home, but that means it was good advice. So
Nice. Good. Well, great.
very good. So Brett, we'll give you a chance to kind of tell us. I know you're on Instagram, MoneyRx for CRNAs. You're associated with Oak Street Capital as well. You've got a couple books on the market. Why don't you tell us a little bit, anyone listening that might be interested in contacting you for financial planning, how can they get in contact with you? What's the best method for that, and how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the easiest thing, it's really fascinating, this kind of branding thing. MoneyRx for CRNAs and Nurse Practitioners. That's the title of our podcast. That's where we are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So everything's MoneyRx for CRNAs. If you just Google that, you'll find us. Our website is oakcapitaladvisor.com. Again, that was made 20 years ago, so it doesn't really go with the CRNA thing, but
That's all right.
We haven't changed it yet. But that's great. But more importantly, to get with us, I have my own. If you go to connectwithbrett with 2Ts.com, you can get on my calendar. You can schedule time with me. Happy to answer any questions you have. But yeah, most of our content at MoneyRx for CRNAs, you'll find us. We do a podcast every week. We just recorded episode number 100. And
Wow.
Pretty much any other social media, we're there too.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brett, for coming on. It was extremely insightful. Like I said, just hearing your expertise on things that we don't really get any education on it. It's more so self-education, unfortunately, even in high school and in secondary education. And then it feels like as you move higher up in education, you actually get less education about finance. So I think that all the points that you had to offer were excellent. And just thank you for your expertise. Thank you for your insight.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it. You guys are on the right track. You have a bigger future ahead of you, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It was an honor to have you.
Thanks so much, Brett.
Thank you again to CFP Brett Fellows for coming onto the podcast and sharing his expertise on finances and financial planning for CRNAs at all levels of their career. To get more information from Brett, please go ahead and give him a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at MoneyRx for CRNAs. If you want to connect with him directly, go ahead and look him up at connectwithbrett.com as well as oakcapitaladvisor.com as well. Thank you again, Brett, for all you offered to us throughout this podcast. I encourage all of our listeners to listen to it and then listen to it again, because there is so much valuable insight that he shared with us throughout this episode. Thank you again to our listeners for tuning in. Please check out all of our podcasts at Spotify, Apple Music, as well as YouTube. And be sure to check out our daily anesthesia content on Facebook and Instagram at Mechanics of Anesthesia. We'll talk soon.